Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily, the first English news program in Poland. I am your host, Benjamin Lee. The funeral of the late mayor of Gdańsk, Paweł Adamowicz, is taking place today in the Basilica of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Gdańsk, where the ashes of the murdered politician currently resides. The funeral of the deceased mayor was attended by family and friends, the highest dignitaries of Poland, including the president, politicians and officials from all levels of government across the country.
The city of Gdańsk said their goodbyes to their late mayor, Paweł Adamowicz. At a request from the victim's family, residents of Gdańsk donated money to charity instead of bringing flowers and grave lanterns. The memorial service started at noon at the St. Mary's Church in Gdańsk. The mass was conducted by the Archbishop Sławoj Leszek Głódź. We gathered here today in the famous St. Mary's Basilica in Gdańsk to pay our respects and say our farewell prayers to the tragically deceased Paweł Adamowicz. However, we are also here to confirm that we still remain connected with this man who is on his way to eternal life. The relatives of Paweł Adamowicz said their last goodbyes to the tragically deceased mayor.
To jest cudowny czas dzielenia się dobrem. Jesteście kochani.
Now is the best time to be kind to one another. You are all wonderful. Gdańsk is the greatest place on earth. Thank you. These were your last words, Paweł. After you said them, you left this world. But I do not want your funeral service to be overwhelmed with sadness and for us to wallow in grief. Although it is so difficult for us, I want to thank God for crossing our paths many years ago. It was thanks to him that I met a man who changed my life.
Jest nam dziś bardzo ciężko.
A plethora of Polish politicians took part in the service, including the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, as well as members of Parliament and former Polish presidents. After the funeral, an urn containing the ashes of the murdered mayor of Gdańsk was placed in the St. Martin's Chapel.
A man in his 50s set himself ablaze in Prague on the 50th anniversary of the self-immolation protest of Jan Palach, the young student who decided to protest against the Soviet Union's invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968 by sacrificing his own life on the main square of the country's capital. The latest case of self-immolation occurred in the exact same place, but the motive is still unknown.
Eyewitnesses saw a man pour gasoline on himself before setting himself ablaze. I saw him from afar, all in flames. The sight really shocked me. I thought, oh my God, he really is on fire. I ran up and tried to talk to him. Initially, I thought that he was dead, but then a woman said, he's not dead, he's still alive. People told me that a man had set himself ablaze. Some guests from a nearby restaurant ran up to him with a fire extinguisher. I guess that only his doctors and the police know anything about his current condition. The act of self-immolation took place on Wenceslas Square, the same location in which the history student Jan Palach sacrificed his life in a symbolic act directed against the communist regime and particularly the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968. Palach's act was the second case of self-immolation in Central Eastern Europe. It was only preceded by that of the Pole Ryszard Siwiec, who also set himself on fire in a protest against the Soviet Union's decision to crush the Prague Spring. In the following 2 decades, around a dozen of people in Central Eastern Europe decided to protest against communism by adopting this tragic measure of dissent.
The White House announced that Donald Trump will meet the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in February. This will be the pair's second meeting following the historic summit that took place in Singapore in June 2018. The United States representatives are still waiting for the communist regime to take necessary steps in order to denuclearize. The exact date and place of the upcoming meeting remains unknown. The U.S. President Donald Trump released a video message on Friday night calling border security a humanitarian and national crisis, directing focus yet again to the ongoing immigration caravan pouring into the USA. The new migrant caravan numbers a few thousand people and is currently crossing the border between Guatemala and Mexico.
The border security issue is stirred up yet again as a hot-button issue in U.S. politics. Early on Friday, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency released 2 videos of what was identified as 376 immigrants walking along the Arizona desert, reaching the border with the U.S. where they queued for Border Patrol processing. U.S. President Donald Trump released a video message shortly after, directing focus onto the issue and his regard of the situation as a humanitarian and national crisis.
Everybody knows by now that our southern border is a humanitarian crisis. It's also a national security crisis. Things are happening there, and they have been for many years, decades. But it only gets worse with time because a lot of people want to come into our country, and there are a lot of people that we don't want. We have criminals, we have gang members, we have human traffickers, we have drug smugglers. We don't want them in our country. Take the politics out of it, let's get to work, and let's make a deal. We sit down. A lot of the Democrats, they agree with me, they've told me so, but they're afraid to say it. We have to secure our southern border. If we don't do that, we're a very, very sad and foolish lot.
Scores of Central American migrants who crossed into Mexico from Guatemala on Friday, January 18th, waited to be processed by immigration authorities to receive humanitarian visas, along with a wristband that would allow them to remain in Mexico or work as they continue northward towards the United States. They told us not to worry and that it's a program that gives us the opportunity to work and it's all good, just like the first caravan. The mostly Honduran migrants entered southern Mexico on Friday, joining around 1,000 additional immigrants from Central America that arrived a day prior and pressing the capacity of the vow taken by Mexico to guarantee the safe and orderly flow of people. Really, I think it's been great. The Mexican authorities have been treating us well, and I think it's a good opportunity to be able to get a humanitarian visa so that we can get through to there. The caravans have invoked the debates on U.S. immigration policy yet again, with President Trump pointing to the loose border security infrastructures to secure backing for his plan to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border.
That's it for today. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily. But stay tuned for the Poland Daily Business section with Alexander Wojcicki and his special guests.
Good evening, I'm Paulina Otterstein and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Tonight the temperatures will be quite a bit cooler, -4 degrees in the eastern parts, Białystok, Lublin, also in Olsztyn and Krakow, -3 degrees in Rzeszów, and the maximum temperature will be 1 degree in Gdańsk, 0 degrees in Koszalin. No rain or snow is expected tonight, and now let's check the forecast for tomorrow. So some snow will appear in Białystok with -2 degrees, also in Olsztyn and Gdańsk with up to 2 degrees, and the maximum temperature will be 3 degrees. In Koszalin, quite a bit of sun is expected throughout the whole country. Central Poland will see 0 and -1 in Łódź. In the southern parts, -1 in Rzeszów with some snow as well, 0 in Krakow and Katowice. This is all for tonight. Goodbye.
Poland Daily Business Edition. Tonight our guest is Ambassador and diplomat and Dr. Ryszard Żółtaniecki. Sir, welcome to the show.
Good evening.
And we'll speak about this great American-China trade clash. Only a few years ago, there was a main theory of the economics was that there is something like Chamerica or Amer-China. Those countries are mutually interdependent and they're locked in so
Somehow
many relationships.
Sentenced for active cooperation.
Right.
Well, and recent developments and recent data show that is not true. That the tension is growing and the conflict is somehow hanged in the air. The conflict around the concept of Chinese Sea, trade deals. I would like to start with a certain definition of the Chinese character of the Asian, but in this case Chinese civilization. It's not innovative. It's not, look, all discoveries, all innovations which served China to build the empire are invented in the States or in Western Europe. They are masters in changing, in developing, but they don't provide the, I would say, the real discoveries.
This is obviously disputable because we can say that gunpowder,
Well,
charts, paper money, glasses, that all has been invented.
Many years ago, but you know, if you take the high-tech equipment, it comes from the States or from Western Europe.
Because the China suffered, they didn't have the 19th century in a way of industrial revolution and taking part. They've been colony at the time, but now they are coming back.
What they are supposed to do if they don't provide the new technology, original new technology? They have to steal it. They have to take it from others, and they do it.
They do it. They have a people who can develop that technology further. They have a people who knows what they steal in order to deliver the solutions for need.
And they developed a fantastic system of the copying products and transform the products into their own.
That's true.
They are cheaper and the quality is comparable.
Yeah, there are some theories and political analysts who are saying that this is very similar to the times of fighting kingdoms. There was 6 or 7 kingdoms in China. Eventually, one conquered all others, and they are basically copying the same strategy right now. This way or another, cooperating with the main enemy, trying to switch or turn over their allies in order to be allies with China, and this land route from China to Western Europe that's supposed to economically activate the over 3 billion people living in the India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and this part of the world that is very much underdeveloped.
And it's a very handy instrument of colonization of Euro-Asia as a piece, as a whole, including India and United Kingdom. We have to also remember that and keep in mind that Chinese civilization keeps the quite distance, big distance from the other civilization, with a feeling of superiority. For them, we are barbarians.
That's true. Of course, if you consider yourself a heir of a civilization that has 3,500 years, and you look at those Europeans who just popped in the recent 1,000 years, the sense of superiority is obvious. On the other hand, we pretty much mentioned the goals of the China to dominate the world as an economical and cultural power. Is it achievable in current world when we have the strong American no?
But there is a big difference between the American or even Russian attitudes and policies toward the world and Chinese. For the United States is, I would call it, missionary civilization. They want to recreate the whole world into their own, according to their own vision, namely liberal democracy. The project failed. For China, it's
first it was to bring Christ to those poor pagans, and
Yes,
now is
it's a liberal democracy. It's equivalent, exactly. It's equivalent of the cross, of the Bible. But for China, it's irrelevant. They don't care. The only target is money. They come, they take as much money as possible, and they leave or they stay if there is another possibility to make another money, to go further. So domination of China is dangerous in terms of the brutal exploitation of resources and financial market.
So we shouldn't side with China in this Chino-American trade war, and that which is eventually cultural war.
It's a cultural war, and I still believe that the strength of the United States and strength of the Western civilization is strong enough to stop Chinese expansion within the limit of common sense, because we shouldn't contest the idea of the Belt and Road project. It's a very promising, and we can take a lot of advantages and profits from the project, but we have to be very, very careful and develop our knowledge about the Chinese character, Chinese culture, and Chinese politics.
Yes, didn't Poland shoot in its own foot by arresting, that was in the press all over the world, the employee of Huawei who allegedly spied for China?
Yes, our government had no other choice but to stop it. In case of diplomat, you have a lot of legal instruments to get rid of such a person. This is the member of the directorial board of the company. Polish citizen was arrested and the Chinese was in the package. And of course there will be consequences, some painful consequences. They will do something, they will retaliate. Of course, they will not destroy the prospect of the economic cooperation on the great scale, but we will
They benefit from it. 2017 exchange, it was $18 billion import from China and $3 billion export from Poland. So we had minus 15 billion. That's 500%.
Trade deficit, yes.
Yes.
So they have a business here. But they will do something, they will show us that they don't accept the decision of our government, and we will feel the pain.
Okay, so we will see how it will develop, and being part of the game of the big boys may be dangerous for those small ones.
We are not so small. And the weakness sometimes is a very important resources. I think that there is a space and we may play the important role in this global game.
Looking to our own interests. Sir, thank you very much for this explanation. Ambassador and Dr. Ryszard Żółtaniecki was our guest tonight, and that was it for Poland Daily Business. Thank you very much.
Pozostajemy cały czas w drugiej połowie wieku XIX.
We remain in the second half of the 19th century, when a tremendous amount is happening in art and the direction it is going in. So we're going to continue with this topic.
Przy nich pozostaniemy. Marcin Bąk
I Janusz Janowski.
Cały czas krążymy wokół Paryża.
All right, so we're circling around Paris, but it isn't just France, Paris, which produced great impressionists. We can also talk about Poland and Polish artists.
Na pewno tak. Oczywiście we właściwej proporcji. To znaczy musimy powiedzieć sobie jasno, jeżeli chodzi o impresjonizm jako nurt, najwybitniejsze...
Of course, within reason, when it comes to Impressionism in terms of the most outstanding phenomena, France is its birthplace and its capital and center. This is also the moment France confirmed its hegemony in the world of Western art. This work does, however, get the attention of others, including Polish artists. It's important to note that in our Polish art, all these trends come into play a generation later, when the Polish artists, whom we could put into the Impressionist category, are born, post-Impressionism is already blossoming in France. So Poland isn't quite in line with France, but the phenomena clearly do appear in a very unusual and interesting form.
To we Francji już mamy kwitnący postimpresjonizm, prawda? Więc troszeczkę jest to przesunięte, niemniej jednak te zjawiska rzeczywiście u nas się pojawiają.
An important name to mention, and whom we mentioned when touching on the subject of realism in art, is Aleksander Gierymski, who is a wonderful representative of Polish Impressionism. His painting, Altana, is a model example in the Polish history of art. So it's good to go into a bit more detail about it and notice the important differences when compared with French Impressionism. I mentioned last time that Impressionists, because they were painting nature, tended to reach for smaller canvases in order to be able to finish the painting in one sitting.
Jakie ten obraz ujawnia w stosunku do impresjonizmu francuskiego? Otóż, żeby stworzyć to niezwykłe dzieło, zresztą obraz niemały,
The Altana work is a large painting, a painting typical for academic presentations. The whole process of painting was similar to the work of an academic. Detailed research had to be done prior to commencing with the painting. In fact, the research pieces in preparation for this painting are in themselves amazing. But in order to complete his final work, Gierymski figured out all the detailed elements of this piece, so he treated it like an academic piece of work.
Wcześniejsze studia detali. I zresztą studia do tego obrazu uchodzą za wspaniałe dzieła pojedyncze. Niemniej jednak Gierymski, żeby stworzyć ostateczną kompozycję...
The piece, showing the characters sitting down in an area filled with light, surrounded by plants, allowed for a very strong and flickering lighting in the scene on a sunny day. It depicts a genre scene typical for an academic work, but the very technique of the painting is impressionist.
Dzięki czemu taka sceneria pozwalała na naturalne, silne i bardzo rozmigotane oświetlenie sceny.
Gierymski, by hitting clean colors, began to form objects. In a heroic way, Gierymski created a painting in which the whole idea of impressionist workshop doesn't have to be contrary with tradition.
Czyli Gierymski rzeczywiście zgodnie z tą techniką przedstawiania poprzez uderzenia czystych kolorów wytwarzał formę.
Aleksander Gierymski is one of the most conscious artists of the Latin tradition.
Jest jednym z najbardziej świadomych w tradycji łacińskiej.
And Poland's affiliation with this world and its civilization.
Jest malarzem, który w sposób bardzo konsekwentny.
Yes, he's a painter whose creativity was consistently in line with his affiliation to the Latin tradition. It seems that the unusual paintings, such as the one depicting the Seine, similar to Monet's Impression, an unusually big painting with an unusual workshop because it required a lot of time to complete, kept a clean painting technique. So the paintings are constructed with clean colors and compiled with the help of contrasts to beautifully and precisely form the picture.
I takim właśnie impresjonizmem.
With this type of impressionism, Poland joins the trend, although painters such as Podkowinski do come about, who, not in all of his works, but in a certain period, is an excellent painter.
Nie w całej twórczości, ale w pewnym jej okresie jest malarzem par excellence właśnie impresjonistycznym.
Exactly. Podkowinski has to be mentioned when discussing Polish Impressionism, and his most known piece, Szał, or Frenzy. When this amazing painting is discussed, it's said that it's a little impressionistic, a little realistic, and there's a touch of symbolism too. what's impressionist in this piece and what isn't.
Trochę symboliczny. Co tam jest impresjonistycznego, a co nie jest?
Jeżeli chodzi o szał Podkowińskiego, to na pewno nie możemy zastosować kategorii impresjonizmu.
When it comes to Podkowiński's Szał, we can't put it in the Impressionism category in terms of the workshop or expression of the work. What appears to be possible in this field is the particular concentration given to emotion in the topic of the piece.
W literaturze emocje były tym znamieniem impresjonizmu. I emocje oczywiście szczególnie w bogaty sposób opisane, szeroko opisane. Emocje...
As we mentioned, in literature, emotions were the sign of Impressionism. Widely described emotions, emotions clashing with reality, described well by such writers as Żeromski and Remont, who both belong to the realist trend. Still, it seems only the literary understanding of the term realism could be applied to Podkowiński's painting.
Niemniej jednak ten obraz bardziej przynależy stylistycznie do symbolizmu, ale w jego twórczości znajdujemy obrazy par excellence impresjonistyczne.
Stylistically, the painting belongs to symbolism, but in other work we find paintings where he concentrates entirely on landscape and uses impressionist techniques. Even with some of his freedom, clean colors and building of forms, a certain academic approach is noticeable.
W formy dostrzega się jeszcze pewne ciążenie edukacji akademickiej, niemniej jednak jest już malarzem impresjonistycznym. Podobnie jak Wyczółkowski, podobne kryteria należy tu stosować. Podobnie mówimy też o...
Nevertheless, he is an impressionist painter similar to Byczkowski or Ola Boznańska. As a painter of this time, an amazing, brilliant Polish painter, and it seems one of the most brilliant painters in the history of Western European art. However, the Impressionism, when it comes to these artists, isn't as clean as Pankiewicz's, although even some of his work can be placed in the symbolism category, or following more of an aesthetic trend.
Należy sytuować raczej w nurcie symbolizmu, czy w nurtach bardziej estetyzujących.
Hello, welcome to Poland Daily History. I'm your host, Phil Goss. We're at the Praga Museum today in the Praga district of Warsaw. Praga is separated from the main part of Warsaw by the Vistula River, Praga being on the east bank. It's an older part of the city which has been destroyed a number of times over the centuries, although it did escape destruction in the 20th century, meaning we have lots of nice 19th century architecture to enjoy while we walk around the area. It's also the source of a number of different and interesting people, as well as a number of different things as investment points in Warsaw are concerned from the 1930s, 1920s, as well as in the communist times, as well as in the post-communist times. We'll talk to a couple of people here at the Praga Museum who can shed much more light on the subject, and we'll learn quite a bit along the way. Today we're at the Praga Museum speaking with Franciszek Płucennik regarding the history of Praga. So Franciszek, tell me, where does Praga's history really begin and when?
The earliest footage of human presence here is, I guess, 9th or 10th century. And so that's just the eastern bank of Vistula River, right? So Praga has always been to the east of the river, and that's one of the most important things for its history and presence.
So its history is the east side, the east bank of the Vistula, starting in the 9th and 10th century. But was it known as Praga at that time?
No, definitely not. That's just the first human presence we know about in this area. The first information, historical information about Praga as a village here comes from 15th century. Okay, the name Praga comes from the old Polish verb prażyć, which means to burn out the forest, okay, by the farmers. So Praga was just an area inhabited by farmers, just a village at the river. That's the early beginning.
I see. Now, I understand, and please help me fill out my lack of understanding. But I understand that Warsaw started out as Warsz and Shawa, each on the other side of the river from each other. Is that true? Where was this Shawa? Was this Warsz? What was it?
Okay, so both words, Warsz and Sawa, are actually the names, okay, of a man and a woman. It comes up from a legend of a romance between Warsz and Sawa, settling down here at the Vistula River, right? So basically, it refers to a couple, not to two areas, right? Like two different towns. So Warsz and Sawa fell in love and established their place here at the river, but at the western bank of the river, right? Praga was never ever part of this story, actually.
I see. So not like Buda and Pest, which...
Definitely.
Okay, okay.
But like in every big town or every big city that has a big river, like Budapest or Vienna or any else, the river is the most important border, the most important communication route, the most important symbol, right? Always dividing the city in two parts. One is always worse, let's say worse, right? And one is always the capital, like Warsaw, right?
So in Praga, 15th, 16th century, what was here? Farmers and then what?
Okay, just a few villages, right? Farmers, the very early beginnings of craftsmanship. Just keep in mind, in 16th century, the Polish capital city was moved from Kraków to Warsaw, right? So it was just a few villages right in front of the Polish capital city, right? So of course there was huge amount, massive groups of people moving into Warsaw for different purposes, to study, to work, for business, for politics, and so on. So it was just some villages here named Praga, Targowe Wielkie, Golędzinów, Skaryszew, and many, many others, right on the way. So the trade and trading routes were always the main business, the main occupation of people living here since 16th century. Okay, until then, it was mostly farmers. Right after moving the capital city to Warsaw, it was mostly the trade and trading that became the main occupation here.
So, as I understand it, the 19th century was a time of great development here in Praga. Is that's when or perhaps even earlier, when was the first Cerkiew, the first Orthodox church built here?
The Orthodox Church has been founded in 1860s, right, by the Russian governors. That was quite a complicated and dramatic time in Praga and Polish history, right? Poland has been divided between three different countries in 18th century and vanished from the official maps, right? So we had the Tsarist Russian government here, right? Every street had a Russian name. The official education was in Russian, and there was a lot of Russians coming in to live here. That's why the Orthodox Church for Russian community has been built in Praga, because there was a huge and massive Russian community growing in Praga. It was built right at the same time when a bridge and two train stations have been built to communicate Praga with Warsaw through the river, and to communicate Praga and Warsaw with the Russian Empire through two train stations.
That's interesting. Well, that takes us up to the 19th century. We'll take a break right there. This has been Poland Daily History. I'm Phil Goss, with our guest, Franciszek Płócennik.
Praga was from the outset a small and quite insignificant settlement which didn't start growing until a bridge was built across the Vistula River to connect it with Warsaw. It owed its growth to a class of tradesmen who realized the potential of its location. The most famous of them was Szmulzbikower, who was also a friend of and personal banker to King Stanisław August Poniatowski. In 1780, he was made the representative of all Polish Jews by the central body of Jewish authority in Poland, the so-called Council of Four Lands. Next up, we will take a closer look at his activities right here in Praga.
We're here at the Praga Museum with senior curator Jolanta Wiśniewska. She'll talk about some of the more important people in the history of Praga. Ms. Wiśniewska, tell us, whom should we know who was important in Praga's history.
One of the most important characters in the history of Praga, especially for its Jewish citizens, is Szmul Jakubowicz Zbytkower, referred to as the Rothschilds of Praga. He was one of the first modern capitalists in Poland. He was also a unique character for Praga's Jews. He was King Stanisław August Poniatowski's private banker. Because of his friendship, he received a large farm when he ran a big enterprise. So he ran his agriculture enterprise, he had a tannery, he had a distillery. He was a tycoon of trading chicken and grain. He made a lot of money in the second half of the 18th century. After some time, his estate began to be called Szmulowizna, which is what one of the districts of Praga is called today. Tourists who visit Praga often go to the Szmulowizna, remembering Szmul Zbytkower. That part of today's Praga was a very lively center of Jewish life. During a time when Jews were not officially allowed to settle in Warsaw and Praga, this is where they can find their refuge. In the nearby district of Targówek, in 1780, Szmul Zbytkower founded a cemetery, which is the foundation of the functioning of Jewish society. It was here that from 1775 a separate Jewish community functioned with all its institutions. This community existed separately up to 1885, when it was absorbed by Warsaw. Szmul Zbytkower was a very colorful character. Apart from investing and making money, he was a very important person for the Jewish community. Thanks to his entrepreneurship, during this time, the Jewish population increased in Praga. After his death, his third wife Judith took care of and increased his estate. She herself was a very interesting person. She knew many languages, she was very intelligent and good in managing money, and increased her wealth together with Szmul Zbytkower's sons. The family started by Szmul Zbytkower, which later united with other Jewish Warsaw families such as the Taplitsov, Streicher and Berson, had a great and lasting influence on the town's economic and cultural history.
Interesting. Was he among the first Jews to settle in Praga?
Yes, these were the times when, because of a ban on Jews from settling, they were not able to settle in Praga, but from the beginning of the 18th century or even earlier, there was certainly a Jewish presence there, but they weren't permanent residents. Very often they were dealers or entrepreneurs who came through the city. Even during times when it wasn't allowed, it was easier to settle here because Praga was an inlet to the city of Warsaw. There was no bridge, so whoever crossed the Vistula in this area stopped in Praga. For a very long time, there were fairs and marketplaces, and cattle was traded here. There were inns that allowed people to stay here before entering Warsaw, so there was a Jewish presence in Praga a lot earlier than in Warsaw.
Tak więc żydowska społeczność była obecna na Pradze już znacznie wcześniej.
Thank you. For Poland Daily, I'm Phil Goss at the Praga Museum with Senior Curator Jolanta Wiśniewska. As we've seen, Praga has been the source of quite a bit of rich history for Warsaw, as well as a number of influential Warsawians who came from here. Although it is a tight-knit community, gentrification in the past years is changing the face of Praga. Let's hope, though, that it doesn't change the nature of the community. For Poland Daily History, I'm your host, Phil Goss.
Hello and welcome to Poland Daily Travel. We're glad to see you again. In this new series, we're going to go behind the scenes in Warsaw. We will be trolling the nooks and crannies of the capital with our guide Wojtek Młatkowski from, wait for it, Behind the Scenes Warsaw. That's the name of his company, which provides entertaining and informative tours of the big pierogi, Warsaw, beautiful downtown Warsaw. In fact, all of Warsaw. He keeps an eye out for things you simply would not notice without his expert guidance. So sit right back and we will tell you a tale, starting with Plac Zamkowy, or Castle Square in the Old Town. We will then head to the far side of the ancient city, behind the castle, and then over to the Warsaw City Museum to examine ancient foundations. We'll take you for a spin in the revered Żuk van, a motor vehicle so fabulous they named it Beetle, or they named it after a beetle anyway. Yeah. The Żuk rules, as you will see. It pulls the piece together like Lebowski's rug. Yes, there's nothing like cruising the main drag in a crypto-communist car. So stay tuned for the Żuk. We'll make stops in Platz Konstytucji, that's Constitution Square. And we'll go over to the waterworks at Filtrowa, where mystery abounds. So it's adventure and travel talk, as always, in store for you, because we love you, on Poland Daily Travel, behind the scenes in Warsaw. Stick with us. Come along for the ride.
Poland Daily, I'm here with Wojtek, and we're in the Żuk mobile. This is a special car, Żuk.
With a special Polish letter in front of that, a Z with a dot on top of that.
Yeah, tell me something about this fantastic old school
really
van.
Old school. This van is nearly as old as me. This is from the year 1980. That's as old as my sister, but looks much, much older than her.
She looks better.
She looks much better.
That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
You're not comparing your sister to a Żuk, are you?
You know, well, I'm not. It's only the
Listen,
age what
folks,
I compare.
we're not comparing his sister to a Żuk. We're saying she's much, much, much better looking.
I could compare.
But this is a beautiful
furniture.
automobile.
I could compare my furniture in my room with this inside of this Żuk. Yes. Just look at the plywood here. Do we have some plywood here? Yes, we have. And over there too. That is exactly how a Polish furniture would look like in 1980s or 1970s. Yes. That's the same material. Then you will see sometimes this base color of the Żuk, yes, of any Żuk delivered from the factory. It would be a yellow color fitting to the plywood. And then when we sometimes film the Żuk from the outside, you will see that this is red. This particular Żuk was used by voluntary firefighters to go for action or excursions.
Okay.
And then it wasn't...
So if there's a fire...
yes, it would go with the crew. Yes,
okay.
With the crew in this Żuk.
Okay.
And then they would deliver another Żuk with a pump.
Yeah.
And they will find a creek or some water from the tap or what to extinguish the fire. But in most cases, the Żuk was used to traffic people to events.
To transport people.
To transport people.
Not to traffic
events.
people. That's something different.
Okay,
we don't want to traffic
people. Now popular.
Yeah,
I know.
It's
this,
popular, but it's not good.
I didn't have these.
It means
thoughts, yes.
smuggling.
Yeah, it was to go to an event in the next door county, just sports. Yes, and finally we got it, because in this time they get a little bit outdated.
What does it cost to buy a fine? What did it cost you to buy a fine machine like this?
Today, much more than the time we bought this machine. They're getting up in price. It's easily 6,000 zlotys that you can pay for that.
Now. So it's about $1,900.
2,500 euros? No, less than that. No,
less, I think. About
$2,000?
Well, yeah, $1,900. But in this area, yeah.
Of course, it needs a lot
but
of
we're
service.
haggling with ourselves about a fictitious bargain or purchase. But yeah, it's not. But how much did you buy this for? $1,000?
I don't know that.
You don't know.
It's not me who did the transaction.
Yeah.
But it was already quite expensive, as this is in a pretty good condition. If you hear the engine, it's okay because it's a 1960s design, but still the engine sound is quite smooth, isn't it? It's really comparable to any Western European.
It sounds like a very
car.
Big lawnmower.
Yeah, but this is 4 cylinders, not one.
It's 4 cylinders.
It's
okay.
4 cylinders,
Yeah.
and it's quite big. It's over 2 liters, and it has every seat really original.
Yeah.
Like the seat you are sitting on, yes, this is so small, and this is original.
Comfort Plus, I call it.
It is. And back there, I don't know what you guys think about these benches, but they are pretty good for filming.
Yeah, the camera
We have a lot
guy's
of space there.
enjoying the bench, and the sound man's very comfortable. I can see him back there.
Very much back there.
No, he's a good guy.
Yeah, and you can have also some more lights in the front or in the back, so it's quite comfortable in here at night. It's also quite warm. We got special fans installed in here, which were also produced in the People's Republic times. And back at this time, remember, the winters were better. They were much colder than they are today.
Is that right?
Yeah, of
Are you
course.
another one who's? I keep hearing on this show people keep saying the weather is changing.
Oh yes, it is not that as
It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's cold today.
The snow was much higher. Yes,
Yeah.
the snow cover was much higher when it was that high.
Is
Yes.
that your gas mask?
Yeah, that's one of those who get delivered with the car.
Uh-huh.
And underneath the seats there is a small trunk, and they got in there. They have a certain validity, and this one is from '83, so this is 1983. So it is probably very outdated and not useful anymore. Yeah. It even falls apart a little bit here. It's simply time, you know. Never in real proper use, I assume. But still, you know, quite fancy to look at and
Very
put it on your
attractive
face.
for Halloween.
Yeah.
What
And
kind of
well-
mileage do you get, or how many kilometers do you get to a? Is it good or not good?
We never think in mileage. We think in liters per 100 kilometers, and it's in average about 13 liters that it takes to drive around Warsaw and to
Is
get
that
the car
good?
moving. That's okay. That's really okay.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you consider the fact that this is really heavy. That's like 1.5 tons, and it weighs more with people. So yes, you can feel the weight of people in this car, as this is only 70 horsepower.
You guys
That's
need to
about
go on a diet back there. Our whole crew has to go on a diet because they're weighting the Zook down.
Yep. And it's a little bit wobbly, though we never go very fast. It is also not able to go very fast. It has only a 3-gear gearbox, which was, according to an
Okay.
urban legend, designed in 1920s. Yes.
Uh-huh.
They think that this gearbox has something to do with a 1927 Ford gearbox. But this is exactly the range of urban legends. Yes.
What kind of engine do you have in this thing?
Gasoline. Gasoline 4 cylinders, 2.12 liters.
2.12
liters, 4 cylinders. Yeah.
And who made this engine?
This engine was made in Poland.
It was made in
Yeah,
Poland.
it was probably copied from somewhere else, but some say from America, from the United States. But this is an engine that was produced here for many, many years.
Yes, before when we were talking, you said maybe from GM, General
Maybe,
Motors, maybe.
because we
We're
know
not
that
sure.
some parts of this front suspension do relate to an Opel from before World War II.
Yeah, they used to have Studebaker trucks too. Studebaker's American, of course. They use Studebaker engines in a lot of the military trucks.
That is possible, but I
after the
think
war.
that these engines are smaller than the Studebakers. They were giant, yes? And
It's
this
a
is
bigger
just a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
And that really works like a passenger car. And in these conditions, we only need to have 2 gears. We can start with the 2nd gear, not to get it too slippery, and we
Right.
can proceed with the top gear, that would be the 3rd gear, and it would be in theory enough, yes? We prefer to use the 1st gear very often to save the clutch, but still, in these slippery conditions, this vehicle is maneuverable by 2 gears only. It doesn't go all too fast.
Now, what's your top speed?
Outside of the city, of course, because we have a 50-kilometer speed limit, I get 70 with this.
70 whole kilometers?
Kilometers.
Yeah, this is like
And I felt
45
great,
miles
yes.
per hour. Yeah.
I felt great with that. It
Yeah.
was enough for me.
That was
I never
enough.
got a speeding ticket with this car.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, be careful, because that's the sound of power. It's the sound of power, folks. You might hear that. Listen to that. Good Lord. We're going to take off at Indianapolis
When I
in
roared
Formula
the engine,
One.
When I roared the engine
Le Mans.
next door to
Le
a
Mans.
Ferrari, I
Yeah.
get more views. I
Do you?
get more glances. Yes.
Does it drive? Let's see.
Of course, let's see.
go.
Let's put the 1st gear on. That's this one here.
Anybody behind us? No, we're okay. Let's go.
I'm looking.
Yeah.
I'm really careful about that.